If you want to try some really good instant coffee, go to csinstant.coffee, use the code ADVENTURE at checkout, and it'll save you 50%. Long supporters of the show, so I really appreciate them, and I'd really appreciate it if you went and supported them. Thank you. We get closer to the edge, and it says, it's got one of those steep grade signs, check your brakes and all that, and we're like, oh yeah, it's about to be some free miles. And out from in that freaking rest stop, man, we heard this huge bang. This is the Adventure Sports Podcast, where we hear stories of adventure from every corner of the planet. We interview all sorts of folks who are using their sport to explore the world around them and give you the inspiration you need to get out there and have some fun. Hey folks, hope you had a good weekend. You probably remember Dan Vinson from episode 499, where he's talking about his company Monkii, and that's Monkii. And it's basically workout equipment that you can take anywhere, strap it around trees, to branches, around boulders and rocks, to your doorway. I actually have what's called the Pocket Monkii. It's these bars that you can do a ton of workouts with, and you just put it in a doorway. And it works really well, and it packs down to literally fit in your pocket. So if you travel, you can have just really good workouts anywhere you are. And Dan and his partner are the ones that created that, and they did a Kickstarter and raised a bunch of money, and so that's what they do now. And I had him on episode 499 to talk about that experience and what that was like, basically having an idea for the outdoor industry and turning it into reality. Well, this episode is actually him interviewing me for his show, which is called Live Wild or Die. And he talks about training and nutrition, himself. And every once in a while, he brings someone on to do an interview. And he brought me on a couple weeks ago. And so this episode is actually him interviewing me, like I said. But I put his side of the interview and my side of the interview, both recorded independently, put them together. And it worked pretty well. There's a few spots in the interview that the audio overlaps and it's a little bit muffled. But other than that, it sounds really good. And yeah, I really appreciate him having me on his show and to talk about some of my early adventure experiences and some stories. It was really fun to be on the other side of the interview, and I realize when I'm being interviewed, I say like a lot, so I apologize for that. I was editing the show and said, man, I said like 800 times in this episode. But anyway, Dan and I had become really good friends after he was on the show, and so we've been hanging out some, and decided to do another interview. So I hope you enjoy and check out everything he's doing. Everything is in the show notes if you need reference. So, all right, let's get into the interview.
What's up, monkeys? Welcome to episode number 44 of the Live Wild or Die podcast. I'm stoked to have my buddy Mason Gravely. He's a wild man. He's the host of the Adventure Sports podcast. He also works for an awesome company called Athletic Brewing, which I mentioned a few episodes back. And he's been on adventures all over the country and was really inspiring to me. So I really appreciate him coming on.
Dang, that's awesome. Thanks, Dan, for having me on. Monkey Dan, my apologies.
And we were talking about this before, but I remember vividly the first time I ever heard your story, and I was in Italy. I was on a train. I think I was going between Cinque Terre to Florence, and a buddy of mine had sent me this episode of the Adventure Sports podcast, and it was you telling about your bike touring adventures all over North America, really. And the one that really struck a chord with me, well, I guess there was two. One was you rode your bike from Alaska back to Florida. So I was thinking we could kind of talk about that and share that story to begin.
Dude, yeah, absolutely. And my apologies. UPS driver just pulled off and my dog's barking, but I'll try to mute my side and yell at him when I need to. But yeah, man, what part of it do you want to hear? Because it's crazy. It's crazy. That was 2011, so almost 10 years ago now. Isn't that nuts how quickly time goes by?
Oh, absolutely. Well, for me, what was cool to me is how I remember you talking about the story of you and your buddy in your dorm room just how the initial concept came up. Let's just start there, and then we can chip away.
Yeah. So, man, I had gone to Africa that summer on like a service trip, and I lived in this super cheap apartment. I was in college at the time. I had a couple years left, and my buddy and I were just itching for adventure. We're at that time of life where, you're kind of coming of age. You're getting in, you're getting ready to get out of school. Adulthood is coming, but you're also, pretty autonomous as a person. You can make a lot of your own choices. We were taking out, tens of thousands of dollars in student loans. So apparently we had enough responsibility to do that, but also kind of young and free enough to dream big like children in a way. So it's, that age is really cool because your imagination is huge. Your discipline might not be that great, but your body's really capable for a lot of us. And so we were both played basketball at this small college in Florida, and I wasn't playing that year. I hadn't played for a couple years, and we were sitting on our couch. He was going to roommate with me. He was my roommate the year before, and I was living alone this semester, but he always came over between classes. It was right across the street from the school. I had an apartment, and we had a big world map on the wall, super old world map that I got for like a couple bucks at a yard sale. It still had USSR instead of Russia, and just so many places had changed, but it was still it's a cool thing to have, and for a college dorm, and it was enormous. And he and I were just reminiscing about, things we had heard people done. We had, we were just discovering like things like the Appalachian Trail existed, people like John Muir. I don't even know if I knew where Yosemite was at that point. This is Central Florida. We don't know a lot about the West when you aren't taken out there as a kid or something. And so we heard about these two guys in National Geographic that, two 18-year-olds that went by human power from the northern magnetic pole to the southern magnetic pole, and we just thought that was the coolest thing. Unfortunately, one of the guys actually died not a few years after that in a climbing accident. I didn't find that out till honestly pretty recently, but that kind of started this conversation. We were like, what do we do? What can we do? And Paul's like, my buddy Paul who went with me, he's like, dude, let's do the Appalachian Trail or something. And I'm like, well, what can we do in a summer? We have 2 months off essentially from school. And he goes, let's just ride our bikes somewhere. Dude, we don't even have bikes, but okay, we'll get bikes. I'm like, where do you want to go? And he goes, why don't we just go as far away as we can from home and bike back? And I don't know what, but we looked at the map and thought, obviously you can go farther than this, but we said, why don't we just go to Alaska one way and get bikes and just ride them all the way home? In a summer, back to school, essentially, back to our apartment. And that's what we did. And I remember when we had like a 10-minute conversation about it before he had to leave for another class. And he was walking out the door and he said, he's really analytical and kind of type A. He goes, I give this a 20% chance of happening. And he walked out, and I'm like, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. I don't know what that means, but 20%, that's a lot more than 2, or 5. So that's we just started planning from there, man. And that was, probably 6 months before we left.
I miss that time, man. And, I've never done an adventure that huge, but to me, it was always the imagination for these things. It's just, I didn't, as a younger kid, my family, we weren't super outdoorsy. We wouldn't do like these big backpacking trips or anything like that. So I didn't have the imagination for it until pretty much after college, but just hearing stories like this, it makes me think what kind of could have been. So try not to live in the past, but think forward. And one thing I wanted to ask you about that Alaska trip is what's that first day like? You flew into Fairbanks?
Yeah, flew into Fairbanks and actually started there.
So you land, like, what's that first day like? I mean, with this huge journey ahead of you, just what's going through your head? What's that like?
Well, dude, if you don't mind, I'd love to back up just a hair and tell you how we ended up going to Fairbanks. We actually, and we missed our flight to Fairbanks the first time from Anchorage, but I was really stressing when we were planning about where to, do this trip with like where to either go to Anchorage or Fairbanks. We actually had a friend on the basketball team from Anchorage, so that was obvious. Like, let's go to his house. He's cool. He'd love to host us over the summer, but we didn't feel right about it for some reason, and we decided to just buy tickets to Fairbanks. And I remember one time, working with my dad in the backyard. We do construction and painting, so we're filthy all the time. And he's like, hey, man, go over to my friend's house after work one day during spring break, actually. So not long. We left in May, so spring break was like in March or April. It was not long before we left. And I'm like, Dad, I don't want to go to your friend's house. Like, there's a bunch of old dudes. Those are your friends. I don't want to go over there. He's like, nah, you should go with us. And I go to the party. There's a dude there who we get to talking about the trip, and he's like, you know what? My neighbor has family down from Alaska right now. You should come over tomorrow morning and meet them. I forgot all about it, actually, but this guy calls me the next day. It ends up being half a mile from my dad's house. So I go over there first thing in the morning. It's pouring rain, so we couldn't go to work anyway. And there's this old couple sitting on the couch, and I'm like, hey, are y'all the folks from Alaska? And they're like, yeah. Are you the dude riding his bike from Fairbanks to here? I said, yeah. They said, I was like, well, where do you live? They said, we live in Fairbanks. I was like, no kidding. That's where I'm flying into. Like, of all the places in Alaska to be, I know that's a relatively big city, but it's a huge state. They were like, yeah, we live like 2 miles from the airport. I was like, well, will you be there in early May? They were like, yeah, we'll pick you up. You can stay with us. And I said, no kidding. I said, well, we're planning to build an orphanage in Uganda, fundraising for this. And they were like, no kidding. We were missionaries in Uganda for like 20 years. Are you serious? And then I said, is there a bike shop in town that we can kind of like, we don't know anything about, we don't even have bikes at this point. It's 2 months before we leave. They were like, yeah, they said, no kidding. I said, we actually own the bike shop in Fairbanks, Alaska. And I was like, what? They were like, we have since sold it to a friend, but we started it. We're still involved. It's huge. It's like a Bass Pro Shop, man. And so, it's an enormous place. And sure enough, I wrote down my ticket number and flight and everything and times, and I didn't talk to him one time for the next 2 months. And we land in Fairbanks, and they're waiting for us, this 95-year-old couple. And we stay with them for 2.5 days before they send us off. And it was just the coolest thing. It was awesome.
They were 95 years old?
Yeah, they were both in their 90s. They traveled the world. He had spent like 40 years in the military. And what was the other cool thing was, ever since retirement, which had been like 40 years ago, he had driven from Alaska to Florida every year, twice, coming down, then going back as snowbirds. And so he knew everything about the route and was just basically able to educate us on bears, on the Alaskan highway, on everything. And it was just the most perfect connection you could ever have. It was miraculous, man. And I would credit them as being a huge reason why we felt so comfortable going into it, because obviously you don't need that to do an adventure, but for your first one, a small town kid scared to death flying literally across the continent, that was an awesome experience to have with folks that we ended up being pretty close to after the experience.
That's just the universe saying yes.
Yeah, it honestly gave us confidence to keep moving forward. Like, okay, this is supposed to happen. Like, this is absolutely supposed to happen. And so you asked what that first day was like 20 minutes ago. I'm sorry. And dude, we are stoked. They're the Butlers, Mary and Holland Butler is their names. And Holland's got this deep, gruff voice like this. He's just the most manly dude. And Mary's this sweet. She packed us angel food cake to take with us, homemade angel food cake, or angel cake. Yeah, why did I keep saying angel food cake? But anyway, they send us off. It's just like we're leaving our grandparents' house. And have you ever heard of the band Alabama?
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I bought their greatest hits before the trip, and I put them all on my podcast, or on my iPod. Yeah, iPod. Holy cow, that was 2011, and I had bought it from a friend for like $20, and I was listening to "Roll On," like "Roll On Highway," roll on, and I was just like screaming at the top of my lungs, going down the Alaskan highway. And then it just, within 5 miles of this trip, I'm just so high. I can't believe we're doing this. It starts just snowing instantly, and I get a flat tire right away. And then there's there's an air base there And so there's these jets flying in and out. It is deafeningly loud. It's wet. It's icy. There was like some rogue moose in the road, and my spirits were crushed almost within the first hour, just because it was like, holy crap, this is really hard. And so we highly undershot our goals of mileage for the first few days. But man, I can't reiterate enough. Sorry, you hear my kid back there. That's another adventure.
We're a pro family podcast, no worries.
Oh, perfect, man, perfect. I can't reiterate, man. We were just the most inexperienced people. That was only our probably second, maybe third time we had ridden bikes together of any substantial length, like over 5 miles. And so it was really and honestly just kind of go for it situation. But that first day was incredibly difficult.
Well, that was going to be our next question is, I remember listening to the original podcast and it didn't sound like there was a ton of training involved.
No, I mean, we both were pretty fit. We played college sports. Paul's kind of a Navy SEAL that never answered that call. So he's pretty fit. I, on the other hand, not as naturally fit, but we were both athletic. And honestly, sometimes when it comes to something like that, especially maybe a through hike or a bike tour where it's not really technical skills you need to know, it really is a lot of times you let the journey train you if it's long enough. Now, if you're doing a challenge that's like 500 miles in 5 days, you'll obviously want to train. But if you have a pretty extended time period and, you can sacrifice a week or two to kind of let your body get into it, great. But I mean, if you have like 100 pounds to lose, I would obviously try to do that first. But there's plenty of people that start, through hikes overweight and out of shape, and it really sucks for the first few weeks, but your body gets used to it pretty quick. Let's take a quick message break and hear from one of our sponsors. Support for Adventure Sports Podcast is brought to you by Manscaped. They are the best in men's below-the-belt grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your most sensitive areas. Let's just put it that way. The third-generation Manscaped trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to prevent manscaping accidents. Millions of people all over the world have been nick-free thanks to Manscaped advanced skin-safe technology. I remember not long ago, I was making fun of my dad for not having a very hairy chest, and he told me that grass doesn't grow on the playground, baby. And it might be more than you want to know about me and my dad's relationship, but I don't have that luxury. I do have more hair than him, and it needs to be groomed. And so I use Manscaped Lawnmower 3.0 to make that happen. It is redesigned, it's electric, and it was engineered by a team that spent over 18 months perfecting the greatest hair trimmer ever created. So manscaping accidents are finally a thing of the past, and even folks like me that do have hair to groom can do so gracefully. Each battery charge lasts up to 90 minutes, and if you're grooming for more than 90 minutes, you might need to see a doctor. You can get 20% off plus free shipping by using the code ADVENTURE at manscaped.com, and trust me, you and your partner will thank us. That's manscaped.com using the code ADVENTURE for 20% off and free shipping. Manscaped.com. All right, let's get back to the episode.
Right. Well, I did the John Muir Trail, which is not nearly as long as riding a bike from Fairbanks, Alaska to Central Florida, but I trained hard for that. I was running, I was lifting, I was doing, all kinds of stuff. But to be honest, it didn't help that much. Having that base fitness, kind of like you guys were saying, you and Paul had, I think that helped, but it's just nothing gets you in shape like the trail or the road. So I think I wouldn't discourage anyone from not doing a longer event just because you can't, ride your bike 50 miles a day beforehand. So
yeah, absolutely, man. There's so many nuanced skills and movements and flexibilities that happen when you're carrying a 40-pound backpack on the John Muir Trail that you don't get from doing anything else other than just doing that.
Absolutely.
And obviously, in normal life, no one can hike all day long to train, so you kind of have to just get that base fitness up so that you're kind of ready for adventure when the opportunity arises,
Oh, for sure. I did my training hack for when my daughter was younger. I would put on like a 60-pound weight vest and then stroll her around the neighborhood. But it was like this black kind of tactical looking vest. It was a very strange image, I think, for a lot of the neighbors. But
yeah, with your long flowing hair, exactly. You're like, what is this guy doing?
Yeah, where is the world going? So I remember, can we talk about the buffalo?
Oh, sure, man. Yeah. What do you want to hear? You just want to hear the buffalo story?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Man, I'll say this, like, so much happened on that trip that felt larger than life. I will say, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, of course, like what the years will bring, but I will say this Alaska trip was the most just epic, movie worthy, and just so you can't recreate your first experience, if that makes sense. And so no matter what I do, I think I'm always going to know, like I'm going to know what adventure and journey is like, even if it's a rowboat or a whatever medium. And this trip just had so many things that were just would probably never be happen again to me, but the buffalo was one of them, man. And we don't know anything about bison is what they're really called, but we're a couple weeks into this trip, slowly getting our biking legs and feeling more comfortable with around grizzlies and around these animals and around just the isolation that is on the Alaskan highway, other than tons and tons of logging trucks and RVs. And it's a true adventure, man. It's an awesome to be out there. And we get into British Columbia. We just crossed through the Yukon Territory, and on the first day there was this giant billboard that said, like, watch out for bison. And I'm like, okay, that's yeah, we've seen a ton of animals, but no kidding, man. As soon as we crossed that sign, they were everywhere. It was like they knew to be behind that sign. It was like, holy cow, there's hundreds of them every day. And they behave like cattle. 99% of the time, they either run towards you or run away or just stand there, just awestruck by what they're looking at. As a cyclist, they don't care about cars. They see them all the time. They must see a fair amount of cyclists, but they act like they haven't. So we're climbing up this pass on the very first day entering British Columbia, and it has been a long day. And it's getting close to June, so the sun's up for like 15, 18 hours a day. Yeah, probably 18 to 20. It was long, long days. And we get to climbing up this hill, and there's this thing laying in the grass, and we can't tell what it is. It looked like it could be a bear or a bison, and we get closer, and we're kind of like on the other side of the road not to get close, and because, there's hardly any other cars out for some reason that day. Like, it was pretty empty. And we get closer, man, and this thing pops up on all fours right as we were passing it, and it was this huge bison, and it just starts sprinting away from us. But it was sprinting in the road. It had forever in each direction, woods and prairies of all kinds just to run into. You know what I mean? Like, it was forested, but then there were meadows, and it just ran in the road. And right in front of us, it sounded like a horse, and it was loud. But it just stayed in the lane, right in our lane, and just ran right in front of us. And we got over this hill and started going pretty quick and caught it. Like, we had to press the brakes just to keep away from hitting it. We were probably, we kept a safe distance, probably 50, 80 feet back. But this thing was just running, not sprinting at this point, just kind of pretty good pace, just running right in front of us. And dude, it did this for 10 miles. Like, a few cars, we did see a few cars in that pretty much 45 minutes it was doing that. And all of them stopped. All of them pulled over, and we're like, oh my God, this one trucker pulled over, and he yelled out his window at us as we were flying by. He goes, I've never seen this before. I was like, I haven't either. So this thing's just running, man. And what's so funny is it started getting tired because we could see it would turn to look back at us like it was, like we were chasing it, like it was scared to death of us. And every time it turned back and looked, we could see its 1.5 foot long tongue hanging out of its mouth, and it was just swinging like a cow's tongue. It was hilarious. And then the road flattens out, and there's another pass to go up, and so we slow down, and it just keeps going, man. It goes out of sight, and so we're like, holy cow, that was a strange hour of our life. And up this hill was supposed to be this rest stop, and it was just about getting dusk, so it was probably like 9:30 at night at this point. We just were riding. We were just zombies, man. We destroyed our bodies on this trip. We had no idea what we were doing. We would get up at noon, ride till midnight, eat crap the whole time, and just stupid college kids, honestly, and just figuring it out. So we were like, we're gonna eat a bunch of junk food and probably go to bed. But we get up to this gas station. It was a bigger than that. It was a rest stop with a hotel and everything. It was on the map. It said it would have stuff, and we were getting low on food. We pull up to it at the top of this hill, and dude, it was just abandoned. There were weeds growing and everything. Every window was broken. Cars were just burned like on blocks. It was really eerie because the light was it was low enough. It was coming through the trees and it was getting cold. It was really bizarre feeling. And we were like, oh crap, we need food and we need, to play, not, we weren't going to stay, we were going to camp, but we need food, of course. And we're looking forward to this. And so we're like, well, we're going to have to go another 40 miles to the next town tomorrow, just make sure we get a little bit more tonight. And we just didn't even think about the buffalo. But like I said, the rest stop was on top of a hill, so there was another pretty good downhill coming for quite a few miles. It was going to be going downhill. And we get closer to the edge, and it says, it's got one of those steep grade signs, check your brakes and all that. And we're like, oh yeah, it's about to be some free miles. And out from in that freaking rest stop, man, we heard this huge bang. And we look back, and coming out like it was pulling onto the road was that buffalo, that bison again.
Oh no.
But this time it was behind us. And we could tell it was the same one because it had its tongue hanging out. And it was like, and it had its horns down. It was sprinting this time, man. So it gets onto the asphalt again and is just running at us, just clicking its heels. And I start screaming, and Paul starts screaming, and we're looking at each other like, oh my God. And dude, it gets within 30 feet of us before we crest the hill enough to gain enough speed to go faster. I mean, we're probably going 30. They're pretty fast when they're running, but it's hard to go 30 on a bike when you're fully loaded with gear, unless you're going downhill. Our bikes were probably like 80 pounds at that point, so we had a lot of junk that we didn't need. Let's just put it that way. Didn't know what we were doing. If I haven't said that already, we get going. We go down a couple turns. It's probably, I don't know, man, just maybe it was a lot shorter downhill than I thought, a mile or two. And then you cross a river and you got to go back up another pass. And I was like, oh God, we got to get out here and hide, or this thing's going to catch us because it's coming. And we jump off the bikes and we go to push them into the woods, and I turn around, and probably 200 yards back around the corner, here comes the buffalo kicking up a cloud of dust behind it. Now we got to go up this hill because it saw us. We can't just hide now. So we start huffing and puffing up this pass. It's probably like a third of a mile just straight up to another plateau. And we're like, dude, we got to make it up this. And we start just cranking the pedals and going like 4 miles an hour, maybe. And this thing is gaining on us. And it gets close again, man. And then it just stops and stares at us. And we didn't take any chances. We decided to go ahead and crest the hill. But when you got to the top, it flattened out and you could see for like a couple miles. And all along the road, when we got up there, were just more bison, just tons of them, all like cows resting for the night. And I said, there is no way in hell that we're going to be pedaling anymore and disturb any of those. So we couldn't see the other one at this point that was chasing us. So we just pushed our bikes probably 50 yards into the woods, super thick forest, and just sit there. It's pretty much dark at this point. It's pretty dark. You don't need headlamps quite yet, but it's getting there. And we are like, all right, I think we're good. Let's set up our tent. And so we have to walk probably 30 feet from our tent just to find a spot big enough to put a 2-person tent down. So we set up the tent. We walk back to our bikes that are leaning against trees, and we grab all our sleeping stuff. And I heard my buddy Paul, he turned around before me. He said, "Holy mackerel." And I remember because I'm like, who says holy mackerel anymore? and I turned around, man, and on the other side of our freaking tent is the buffalo standing there looking at us, just breathing. It was going to kill us for making it run a marathon. And I knew it was the same one because his tongue was hanging out. And dude, without any hesitation, it was probably 2 seconds. You know how that it feels like longer, but it just looked at us. It was totally still, and then it just sprinted away from us back to the road and presumably towards those other bison. And it just, you could hear its feet hitting the asphalt till it got out of earshot. And we were so paranoid that night we could hardly sleep because we thought it's just going to come here in the middle of the night and lay on top of us and kill us because they're like 2,000 pounds. And yeah, that was really freaky, really eerie. And we saw hundreds more. Never had an experience like that with another bison. So that was the bison story.
That is freaking wild, man. I mean, in the episode I listened to, you kind of, it was more of a kind of general description, but gosh, man, that's like horror movie status there.
You know, it was crazy. It was crazy. It felt crazy in the moment, but I remember having a moment where I thought, this is going to be a cool story if we get through this. And yeah, I guess I'm glad it happened. It was fun looking back.
What's funny is the next thing I was going to bring up is, what was your craziest story from the trip? Would you say it's that one, or are there others?
Man, there are a lot of crazy stories. I'd say with an animal encounter, that was one. There were other like heartfelt things that happened, you know, I don't know. I've met cool people that like took me in for the night, and I don't know. There's been a lot of cool things happen, but there was one night in Montana, man. We got a ride from this guy who was obviously drunk and driving, but we felt that we should go with him. Like, I can't explain it. I felt like we need to go with this guy. And we ended up going with him, and we had to like reach over and grab the wheel. It was like, what are we doing? But we get back to his house, and we just have the most wonderful experience with him and his wife. And you know, he was struggling with alcoholism. Was struggling with like purpose in life, and so we just stayed up really late in the night having these amazing conversations. And you know, we say goodbyes tearfully the next morning after we stay in their beautiful Montana lodge. And just tons of stuff like that happened that you just can't, when you plan an adventure, you can't plan for the favorite parts of your adventure. You're not even planning for, you know what I mean? Like, you're training, you're preparing all this equipment. But the things you're going to leave from an adventure are just those things that you don't even know what they are yet, whether it's some sort of amazing meal or some experience with an animal or another person, or just a moment that you're just not even foreseeing at this point, if that makes sense. And that's what was so surprising about that adventure, was how much happened that we didn't even have the imagination to think that would ever happen, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I love that about these longer, especially the human power trips, but those longer trips where the trip itself is kind of a gateway or a portal into all these different interactions and experiences that, like you said, you can't plan these things, but you have to do this kind of putting yourself out there, or you have to put yourself out there in these situations so that you can, you know, at least have the opportunity. So I'm sure there's hundreds more stories you have like that. And what I wanted to ask you is, I remember in that episode I listened to, there was an instance where you guys were camping and there was like tornado sirens going off, and someone came at you with a gun.
Oh yeah, with a gun. Yeah. Yeah, man, same trip. I'm telling you, this trip was crazy. We're in the middle of Nebraska, right? And I was on the phone. We're in the middle of Nebraska. And if you've ever been there, parts of it at least, it's just tons of cornfields. A lot of it's not. A lot of it's really, Nebraska's really cool, actually. Really enjoyed it. This might have been Kansas at this point, right at the border. But there's a baseball field out in the cornfields, like to Field of Dream thing. But it's close to this high school, so it's their baseball field. And I just thought, This was kind of before smartphones too, honestly. I didn't have a smartphone. My buddy did have an iPhone 1. No, smartphones were around. We were just poor college students. That's what it was. Yeah, I think iPhone came out in '07, so yeah, it'd been out a while. But we were just broke, and so we had paper maps. That's all we had for the trip, and like literally an atlas. So we don't check weather. We don't do anything. Like we don't know anything that's coming really, other than we just draw our route on a with a highlighter on a map, and we go through this little town, tons of them out there, and it was getting close to dark, cornfields everywhere. We see this baseball field and thought, let's just go sleep in the dugout or somewhere where it's clear grass under a tree. And so we go set up for the night, and it's getting dark, and my cousin calls me, and he had quit drinking. He was just looking for some like moral support. And so I was talking to him. He was real worried about finding new friends, because when you give up alcohol, a lot of times you give up your social life too. And so I was just encouraging him, like, hey man, he was an alcoholic, and I was just on the phone with him, talking, just encouraging him, telling him about the venture. And I'm walking through the cornfield, and through the corn, stalks, a light just shines out of nowhere right at me. And underneath the light is the barrel of a gun. And this guy was like, what are you doing here? And I said, hey man, I am biking across the country to build an orphanage. And he's like, it's probably the first time he's ever heard that. So he didn't really talk at all. And I just explained, I'm like, hey man, we're college students. That was the great getaway right there. We're college students. We're biking across country. We're doing this for charity. We're just camping here at the baseball field tonight, and we'll be gone tomorrow. And he said, okay, and just backed out and back into the freaking corn stalks, man. It was really wild. And I was on the phone still, and I was like, I won't say his name, but I said to my cousin, hey man, this just happened. And he's like, are you kidding me? And I walked back to the tent and told Paul, and it was just like another thing, man. It was really bizarre how stuff like that seemed to happen every night, every day. And then we go to bed. Within 2 hours, man, our tent is about to rip apart and tornado sirens are going off. And so we're like, oh my God, I opened the tent and it looked like a movie scene. There was just lightning. The clouds were just pitch black with lightning. It looked like just the gate of hell was opening up on these big storms. It was really, really bizarre and freaky. And I just thought, we just laid there and thought, well, there's really nowhere we can go. So let's just hope the tornado doesn't go over us. And it didn't let up for hours. We ended up falling asleep in it just out of exhaustion. And we woke up and everything's strewn everywhere. Our bikes are on the ground and it's muddy, and we get up the next morning and go into the closest gas station, and there's just a bunch of good old boys sitting there at the diner, and they're like, where the hell did y'all come from? And so we sit and talk with them for a while. They buy us a couple biscuits, and it was just another day, man. It was cool. It was really fun. Time for a quick message break. CS Instant Coffee is definitely the best instant coffee I've ever had. In fact, just out of convenience and how good it tastes, I decided for the last year I've been taking it on every single adventure I go on, from backpacking to bike tours, just from convenience sake. It's really high quality, and it keeps me from having to take a bunch of other equipment out in the woods. But it's not just for going out on adventures. My wife actually takes some to work every single day with her. She takes a couple packs to refill her coffee mug as a teacher. She doesn't have a ton of time to have to make fresh coffee all the time, so she just needs a little hot water, can pour the coffee in, and she's ready to go for her next class and not waste a lot of time. So if you're crunched for time in your job, I would definitely suggest giving it a shot, because they have been huge supporters of the show for the last year, and I really appreciate everything they've done for us, and it would mean a lot to me to go support them. So if you're interested, go to csinstant.coffee and support those who are supporting the show. It would go a long way. Thank you. All right, let's get back to the episode.
I think you could write an epic coming of age movie script and sell it for millions of dollars to Hollywood. So something to consider for a side project. But so to me, what's always been interesting about these longer trips, it's the ending. especially when they're longer, you kind of get in this flow state where time kind of ceased to exist. The day doesn't matter. The month doesn't matter. What was it like those final few days once you're getting close to home and once you got home?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we weren't by any means out in the wilderness, so a lot of people would say, this wasn't the most hardcore thing, it's the trip I've ever heard of, and I think it's all relative, man. Like for me, it felt like I was on top of Everest. You know what I mean? Like it was that kind of experience coming from my background. But, sorry, you said as we got towards the end. My apologies.
Oh no, so for me, like I think the longest. Well, I guess I did a 2-month overseas trip, but it wasn't contiguous. Like it wasn't this one adventure I was doing. And so what I'm curious is like, once you're getting close to home, what's it like? What's going through your head as you're getting close to home and that feeling of this trip ending that's been there's so many awesome things, so many stories, and it's like you don't want it to end, but you're excited kind of for the next phase. What was that like, the finale of that?
So we had to get back before the semester started because I had to start school, and also my buddy Paul, his girlfriend, was graduating college, so he had to be there for that. And obviously they had been together for like ever, and they're married now with 2 kids, so it worked out. But yeah, they're great. He's my best friend. Man, as you get closer, it's so weird. Like, it was obviously less dramatic scenery. We were going through beautiful places, but we were actually getting to more scary places. Like we went through Mississippi, Arkansas, Alabama, parts of Alabama, and there were back roads of Mississippi that honestly gave me more fear than parts of the world I've been in really poor places. It was really, really backwoodsy and really felt incredibly unsafe at places. So I'd say in some ways it was a lot easier, but in other ways it was like, dang, this is really still an adventure. And it was adventure up until the last day. We had some people join us at the Florida border. One of our basketball friends who was not a cyclist, but he joined us, and his parents dropped him off with us. And I bet they were thinking like, who the hell did we just leave our kids with? Because Paul and I looked like, I'll just say this, Paul, every time we go through an airport, Paul gets stopped. He has a dark complexion, dark hair. He's very serious all the time, and I'm kind of this long, stringy, redheaded, goofy white guy. With 2 months of hair growing out, Paul had hair down to his shoulders and a giant beard. We looked rough, man. And as we got closer to home, more and more people joined us. So one of our basketball coaches joined us, but he was a wild man because he didn't even have brakes on his bike. He just grabbed it out of his garage, and he ended up being quite a liability for us because he kept running into things. He ran into cars, and we kept having to stop and deal with it. And he ran into stop signs and just fell off his bike a number of times. This is like within 10 miles of the finish, and we couldn't get there. And then on the very last day, man, we're at an intersection waiting, and this homeless man is talking to me, and he's drunk as can be. What are you guys doing? Why are all these people on bikes? I was like, we just rode from Alaska, and we're almost done, and we're building an orphanage. And he goes, no way. And he hands me a lotto ticket. He goes, man, I just won like $20. You can have this. He goes, I want you to donate it to the orphanage. And it was a really touching moment. And he handed me the ticket. And he was holding on to the stop sign, the light post. And then he was like, oh, no, man, that's too much money. And he took it back and he walked away.
I was starting to get all choked up for a second.
I know. This is going to be a story I'd tell about, the power of doing something. And then this guy he had his opportunity, man. You know what I mean? He had his opportunity to do something and he didn't. Maybe he gave it to somebody else, but no, man, as we get closer, it was a surreal feeling getting to the finish of something like that. And, if you come from a family of adventures, that might not sound like a crazy adventure to you, but just like you said, man, to my family, this was about as equivalent as going to the moon. it was just the most bizarre. I can't tell you how little support we found in our families, or both of our families. We find out when we get home that everyone's taking bets that we're going to quit, where we're going to quit, and if we're going to die or not. And so people were like, hey, here's your $5. And it was like, really? And everyone just starts admitting what they thought when you first told them. Wow, you guys really did not support this at all.
Who bet that you would die?
Oh man, one of my friend Paul's, his dad's friend actually apologized to us. He goes, "Man, I actually bet your dad that you'd die on the trip," and I realized how just terrible of a bet that was. Most people bet that we would quit before Montana, and but man, once we got back, all our families were there. It was kind of we had raised a lot of money. We had, done a social media campaign and been on a couple news outlets, and it was really rewarding combining adventure with a purpose, and everyone was there waiting on us. We had a big barbecue. We rode straight to my buddy's house in Central Florida, right to his driveway. And I don't know, just seeing the look on my family's face, like, holy crap, you did it. It was just something I'll never forget, and something I always want to recreate that somehow. I always, there was this feeling of completion that I never felt before. And so that's kind of what started the whole thing. And that's kind of what led to essentially 5 more cross-country trips and all kinds of other adventures, and honestly, all kinds of other pursuits. That the lessons you learned really translate to everything in life. And for better or worse, I've made a lot of my decisions based in life since based on the lessons I learned in that trip. And so the legacy of it continues. I don't want to be one of these guys that just always talks about, college football days or something, or high school, whatever days. I don't want to be that guy that's just always talking about that one adventure. But, it is something I reflect back on a lot and think that was a really important experience in life at a perfect time. And I don't know what I'd be different, how I'd be different if I hadn't done it. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely, man. No, man. I think, first of all, you're extremely downplaying the magnitude of that adventure. I mean, how many miles was that ride?
It was 5,300, the route we took.
Crazy. What you're making me think of is it's such a kind of a rite of passage, right? And it teaches you self-reliance and problem solving and all these things that, I think existed back more in the kind of hunter-gatherer days. But, I was fortunate to have a similar experience as a wilderness ranger when I was still in college. And, I wasn't riding my bike 5,300 miles across the country, but I was out in the wild on my own. And, I still talk about that regularly. I mean, the monkeys are probably sick of that. But, it is something it's such an important, I think, especially for guys, it's such an important part of that kind of coming in age and going from a boy to a man. And it's something I think that's been a little bit lost, especially in Western culture. So, oh man, just hearing your reflections and your excitement, I can see that look in your eye, thinking back on it. It's, I appreciate you sharing it with the monkeys. Heck
yeah, man. I appreciate it. You asking great questions.
Thank you. No. And, gosh, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you've done the Tour Divide. You did a bike tour around a bunch of national parks, kind of in the Southwest and West. You've done the Colorado Trail. You've done all these epic things. But what I wanted to talk about was, before we go, 2 things. One is, so you have how old is your son now?
He is 9 months old now. Yeah, you can probably hear him right now crying.
And we had a great conversation about this a couple weeks back. Mason and I met up in Denver and just had an awesome conversation. Thank you again. And we were talking about just how does being a dad affect adventure? Or I guess the better question is, how are you approaching adventure now that you're a dad?
Man, I'll be honest, 9 months has flown by, so I don't know if I figured anything out, but I've got a couple big adventures planned this year. But just a little bit of where I am. I had a couple injuries on my last adventure, and I tried to climb all the 14ers at once, which was really stupid because I wasn't nearly prepared, and bike between them all. A couple people have done it, but I got through like a third of it before my knees just gave out. And come to find out, I have pretty bad arthritis in my knees. So it's kind of caused me to kind of, and this is right around, I find this out recently. So it's, when we're having a kid, I'll be honest, I was pretty resistant towards having a child at first. It was a really big point of contention with my wife and I, because I thought it would just take away this whole life. And what really encouraged me was, interviewing people on my podcast, people like you who I do respect and I do admire and I do want to emulate, who have kids. And I just think, that's just, I don't know. I was really resistant. And then I just thought about some of the lessons I had learned on these experiences and thought, you know what? I said, just screw it. Let's just do it with all these other trips. Especially the first one. That's the attitude that got it done. I'm going to do that with a kid. Like, it's going to make Emily happy. I know I'm going to love this thing. I know I'm going to really want to be a dad when I see it. I guess I was just pretty afraid of having a child because it would interfere with my adventures. But man, not being 9 months into it, it's like the greatest thing in the whole world. Like I thought I loved my dogs before this. Now I'm like, y'all can go run away if you want to. I'm good. I mean, not really, but you know what I'm saying? Like the love I feel for my son, Leon, is just so much greater and so much. I don't know what the world of adventure is going to be like because my desires are different. I don't want to be gone for 3 months. I want to now help other people have adventures. So I doubt I'll do anything it's very possible I'll never do something again that people are like, whoa, but I also don't need that as much as I used to. I want to help this person do their adventure. I want to help fund this guy's adventure, or, answer questions or, I'm acting like I'm some old retired guy. I'm not, but at this specific stage in life, I don't know, man. I don't feel like adventure is at all less possible. I just feel like my imagination's different.
That was extremely well said. No, I think, I think again, we're culturally kind of conditioned that, you have kids, your life's over. It's going to be stressful. You're not going to have time, money, expenses, all this stuff. But like you said, it's all about your attitude. And I feel the same way. It's been a shift in attitude and desire and just, making my goals meet the situation. And, there's also the factor of you don't want to be gone. You want to experience their childhood and see them, all these little changes like we talked about, how they're like this seed that it keeps growing every day. And then next thing you know, they're jumping off couches and whatnot. But no, it was really encouraging when we talked a few weeks back, just hearing your attitude and perspective. And I think there's a lot of other folks out there that are in similar situations. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. And I'm actually interested. You said you don't come from this background, and I don't either. My dad's pretty wild. He's a wild man. You gotta have him on the show. This guy is nuts, and I will say he that's probably I inherited some of that and probably put it towards a more positive use in life. He's crazy, but I love him to death. I cannot wait to see what kids that grow up in like your house and my house are like, who have this kind of mindset of let's go do it all the time. Because, it took us kind of doing it on our own. I wonder what it's going to, how they're going to be affected, having that be more of a natural part of life. Like, I want him to go do solo trips pretty young. I want him to have these pretty scary situations that help him grow early on. And you know what I'm saying? Like, is he just going to reach new levels that I never could? I don't know. I don't know if you ever think about that.
Right. No, I hear you, man. I think it's kind of like I was saying earlier. I think it's presenting the possibility and encouraging that imagination for those rites of passage, especially, late teens, early 20s, when you're so impressionable and it's so good to explore the world and have these interactions with people and kind of build your self-reliance and your faith in humanity as well. Like you're saying, the vast majority are kind, welcoming. They're ready to help you at the drop of a hat. So
absolutely. That's the biggest lesson I've learned. That right there, faith in humanity. People are good. And everything you hear constantly on news and Twitter, it's really, really skewed.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I got one more thing for you.
Yeah, go for it.
I want to talk about Athletic Brewing. which is non-alcoholic craft beer, which is delicious. I highly recommend it. Mason was kind enough to hook me up with some, and I'm hooked. I'm hooked, and it's a good thing it's NA beer because I could get dangerous. But I would just love to hear you talk about your role for Athletic Brewing. Maybe talk a little about the company, and then we'll wrap this baby up.
I appreciate you mentioning that. It's like the first real job I've ever had. No, just dude, it's so crazy. You can draw a timeline from where you are now to, where you've been. Like, okay, this opportunity led to this and this and this. Well, through adventure, I eventually got hooked up with this podcast, Adventure Sports, eventually took it over, just kind of a roundabout way. And then through that got led to Athletic Brewing, where I work now. And it's like you said, non-alcoholic craft beer. And the reason I didn't start it or anything, I run their ambassador program, and I kind of plan all their adventures. They're extremely adventurous people. And so I use my skills biking across, all the time I didn't spend going to internships. I went biking instead across country. It's finally paying off. Take that, Mom and Dad. And so, no, just kidding. It's so many people are turning, like you and I, just a healthy direction in life. Maybe they're just now discovering a sport or adventure or something they really want to do. And they also have a lot of responsibilities, whether it's work, kids, or both. As we get older, our lives get more busy and need to be more organized. And what often doesn't fit in that is, late nights drinking with friends or morning hangovers. I can have 2 beers and I will have a pretty good headache the next day, especially if I go hiking in the mountains, because it just kind of, it magnifies that effect. And so even 2 beers now is like, what's more important to me, having 2 beers or climbing a 14er? Obviously, but here's the thing: those 2 beers are often had with friends, so that's important. The social aspect is important. So non-alcoholic craft beer is for people who want that, but also want to watch their kids, Little League game the next morning, or also want to go trail running or want to go mountain biking or want to live this Colorado lifestyle the next day. And so there's so many situations now. And in fact, since I've started working with them, I've just cut back on alcohol almost altogether. It quenches my thirst. It's a great, it's brewed exactly like beer. There's just a patented process that keeps alcohol's levels low. So it's a great company, hugely supportive of crazy ideas. Obviously, non-alcoholic craft beer is a pretty crazy idea in itself. So we love adventures. A lot of our ambassadors are thru hikers and trail runners and just, ocean rowers, all kinds of crazy people. So if anyone out there who is interested and wants to try the beer, man, please reach out to me. It's a really cool product and people are loving it.
Yeah, I 100% vouch for that. And I remember the ingredients. Is it all organic ingredients? I know there's that was kind of something you guys are doing as well, right?
Yep, it's made with all organic, all natural. There's nothing that goes into it that makes it non-alcoholic. It's just what we prevent it from happening. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing extra. It's not burn off, like a lot of normal NA beers, like O'Doul's is a burn off kind of process, but what that burns off as well as alcohol is a lot of flavor. So this is craft beer. We win gold medals constantly at international beer festivals, running up against alcoholic beers, and so it's non-alcoholic beers here, man. And this is one of the communities we're definitely growing the most in, is the Boulder, Denver area, Colorado in general. So you'll start seeing it. We're available at Total Wines, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, and yeah, man, it's really not just the drink; it's the lifestyle they promote. Is get out there, make something happen, do something crazy, start a podcast, start a company where you're, selling workout equipment that can hang over a door. Go do something like that. You know what I mean? Like I'm a Monkii, man. I use my Monkii bars every day, dude. Do you know that?
Glad to hear that.
It's awesome. It's great. And I love rowing. I love rows. So that's perfect, hanging over the door. And I'm going to use them tonight. I got to work out tonight.
Heck yeah. Well, and you know what? I wanted to, cause you're going to do that. You're doing a kayak trip from the Bahamas. Is it Bahamas back to Florida?
Yeah, Bahamas to Florida, man. And so that's an example. Oh, sorry, were you going to ask a question about it?
Well, I want to send you the ISO core because I think it will be a good complement to that type of training. But please continue.
Oh man, I would love to, because I will say, we were talking about it as we were walking through the snow back to our cars after the meal that we had together downtown last week. There's so many adventures that sound cool, but you just know you can do them. Not that you have the skills, but there's something about them that doesn't spark you, even though you've never done it. I don't know. I that happens to me sometimes. But something, I'm like, what's an experience I know nothing about, and that's ocean kayaking. I've kayaked a lot in Florida, lakes and rivers, and a little bit in the ocean, but nothing like crossing something, a strait or a sea. And there was this opportunity to go to the Bahamas and kayak back to Florida, and it's literally a one-day event. It's like 12 hours. And I thought, I'm terrified of the ocean, and I'm terrified of just sharks, and it just freaks me out just thinking about seeing shadows in the water. And I really get seasick. And so I don't know if I can do that. Even though it's one day, I don't know if I can actually complete that. And then for some reason, that just drew me to it. And so now I'm training for it. I signed up for it's an event that with support boats and stuff. So I thought, okay, as much as I'm probably capable of freaking out in the ocean, I better have some support there just in case, and before I try a solo trip. And I don't know, man. It's bringing up a lot of those same feelings with the first Alaska trip. I've never done that. I don't know if I can do it, and that is intriguing for some reason. And even though this is literally 100th of the length, and it just feels the same, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the certainty of an adventure kind of takes away from the experience. It's that unknown of these things, or the unknowing, at least if you can do it, I think that adds that magic to it. So I'm really stoked to hear how that goes for you, man.
Yeah, I wish you could join, man. Maybe, well, if not this year, let's try to do it another year. Okay, get a double kayak.
Well, I'm still, I still, Mason and I had talked about, or actually, I invited myself, being fully transparent, I invited myself on a trip that he was planning on doing paddleboarding and kayaking from Havana, Cuba. It was Havana, right? Cuba back to Florida.
Yeah.
That sparks some wildness in me. So yeah, I would love to do that. But hey man, I want to be respectful of your time. I really appreciate you coming on the Live Wild or Die podcast. And I want to say, folks, you got to check out Adventure Sports Podcast. You got to check out Athletic Brewing. Mason, where can folks find you?
Yeah, those two places. I'm on Instagram. I don't know my handle. I think it's just look at my name, Mason Gravely. But damn, man, I really appreciate it, man. You're inspiring too. I love just talking with you. You're a great guy, and it's been just so great to get to know you. And I appreciate you having me on and just, spreading the monkey love in this community, man. You guys are wild. That's for sure.
Thank you. Last final question is, what is your dream adventure? You don't have to consider money. You don't have to consider time. You don't have to consider missing out on family. What would be your dream adventure?
Wow. That's something I really want to do in the next handful of years. I can't dream beyond this, maybe. So because I feel like my knees are never going to be what they used to be. I would love to get into adventure motorcycle, travel, my motorcycle touring. I'd love to attempt an FKT of the Pan American Highway from, Ushuaia, Argentina, all the way up to Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, which is, 18,000 mile Pan American Highway on a motorcycle. I think the most realistic dream adventure. I'd love to do that.
You certainly have not lost your imagination for adventure, so stoked to see that happen, my man.
We'll see. It's not mountaineering. It's not it's not human powered necessarily, but I don't know. Another one would be human powered pole to pole, South Pole to North Pole by human power, but that might be beyond me at this point.
The imagination does not cease.
Yeah, man. That's a great question.
Well, Mason, you're the man. Thank you. And again, folks, you got to check out Adventure Sports Podcast. Check out Athletic Brewing. Keep getting wilder. We'll see you guys out there. Monkii on.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to the show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.